first we have Gabriel Durin. He is going to be giving the presentation today. He is the Scientific Technical Assessment and Reporting, which is the STAR team staffer here at the Chesapeake Bay program, employed by the Chesapeake Research Consortium. Gabriel joined the team in July of 2024 after completing his Bachelor of Science in Geography and Environmental Science at the University of Maryland in Baltimore County. Where and here at the Bay program, in addition to the Integrated Trends and Analysis team, which is giving the presentation today, he also supports the Modeling Work Group, the Status and Trends Work Group, and the Non-Tidal Network Work Group. Next, we have Breck Sullivan. Breck is the coordinator of the STAR team at the Chesapeake Bay program and is employed by the U.S. Geological Survey, where she oversees the strategic direction for meeting science needs within STAR and at the Bay program goal implementation teams. Breck also supports analysis activities to advance understanding of factors affecting trends in estuarine water quality and living resources. She holds her bachelor's degree in environmental science from Salisbury University and a master's in environmental monitoring and modeling from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Kaylin Gutman. Dr. Gutman is the Integrated Analysis Coordinator here at the Bay program, employed by the EPA. Dr. Gutman received her undergraduate degree in environmental studies from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and then returned to Chapel Hill to complete her PhD in ecology, and then went on to complete a postdoctoral fellowship with the West Virginia University Institute of Water Security and Science. Kaylin joined the EPA in 2022, where she directs the efforts of development, maintenance, and updating electronic Chesapeake Bay information. So with that, we've got three amazing presenters today, and we can get right into the presentation. Gabriel, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, it's all yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gabriel Duran. I am the Integrated Trends and Analysis team staffer. Thank you, Bianca, for a great introduction. And thank you, Bianca, Rachel, and the rest of the comms team for helping us put together this webinar. We're really excited to share some of our tools. So for today, I'll be presenting on behalf of ITAT, and I'll be joined alongside Kaylin Gutman, who will be joining us right now. She's coming in the room. And then Breck Sullivan, our coordinators. And of course, this work couldn't have been accomplished, all of the tools I will be presenting today, without a dedicated group of people here at the Chesapeake Bay program, including Alex Gunnarsson, a big shout out to him. And then, of course, some interns that we've had these previous semesters, and that we have one now who will be helping us produce some more content. And so, yeah, that essentially today's presentation, today's webinar will be an introduction to the different tools that we provide at ITAT and at the Chesapeake Bay program, and more specifically, two tools that we'll be presenting today. So first, our first tool that I want to talk about is the tributary summary reports. Let me minimize this. Get out of the way. Okay, so we have two tools I'll be presenting today. First, the tributary summary reports. Here's just a screenshot of the first page of our rather more recent tributary summary, the Rappahannock tributary summary. And so these reports, essentially, the Chesapeake Bay program and its partners, we produce tributary basin summary reports for the Bay's 12 major tributaries using tidal monitoring data from more than 130 monitoring stations throughout the main stem and the tidal portions of these bays, of the Bay. And so these reports use water quality sample data to investigate how tidal and non-tidal water quality, specifically total nitrogen, total phosphorus, dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll A, and Secchi depth have changed over time, both in the short term and in the long term. How and which factors may be influencing the water quality change over time. And third, recent research connecting these observed changes in aquatic conditions to its drivers. And so this tool, the tributary summary reports, come out on a rather frequent schedule. Every few years, we have an update for one of our tributaries. And so a lot of these summary reports can be found on our webpage, but this is not the main tool that we'll be talking about today. The main tool that we want to talk about are our geonarratives. And our geonarratives are a tool that can be used in parallel with these reports. And so these reports are static reports that really only reach limited audiences. It's a high-level reporting on what's happening within these tributaries. And so to really bridge these high-level technical reporting of the tributary summaries to broader audiences, the ITAT team, again, that's the Integrated Trends Analysis team, here at the Chesapeake Bay Program Office, we've developed geonarratives that translates this reported information to a user-friendly interactive web platform, or what we use are ArcGIS story maps. And so these geonarratives provide a few different tools that you can use to your discretion. So for instance, first, the geonarratives provide foundational, fundamental background knowledge of different water quality parameters, including some of the ones that I already said, total nitrogen, total phosphorus, dissolved oxygen, etc., and how that's changed over time, both within the short and the long term. How it changes over time. And then, of course, we also like to highlight and share other different research products that are coming out of the Chesapeake Bay program. And so this is some other items that you'll see in the slides to come. And we also like to highlight local watershed organizations in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So for instance, if we're going to be talking about the Potomac tributary summary or have a geonarrative on the Potomac, we'll highlight some organizations within that watershed to kind of showcase the awesome work that they're doing. And so for our webinar today, I will showcase the tributary summary geonarrative format developed by our team. I'll highlight how these reports are disseminated to management and the scientific community, as well as the general audiences, as tools for really measuring progress and transforming monitoring results into actionable information. And so today's presentation is going to be more introductory to the tools that we provide. And so a majority of this presentation will highlight that format of what you will encounter on the geonarratives. And so what you might expect, first, a lot of you who are attending today, thank you again for attending, by the way, are very familiar with the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So we provide a very brief kind of introduction and background information on the Chesapeake Bay, its watershed, and the tributaries that lie within it. Then we also like to talk about, or we will encounter, the physiography, how these major geographic landforms lie within the region and how that might be impacting what we're seeing in our water quality, alongside land use, how humans, or the lack thereof humans, may be impacting that, so including natural lands, developed lands, agricultural lands, etc. How that might be impacting the water quality, the status and the trends, whether or not we're attaining our criteria, both within the short term and within the long term. So we'll be providing some examples of that. What factors might be affecting those trends? Just overarching, looking at watershed loads and their sources. And then lastly, changing environmental conditions and how that might be impacting what we're seeing now, what we've seen in the past, and projections of what we might be seeing in the future. And then we'll close off with really how you can maximize these tools. We want to make sure that we can highlight some of the things that we envision that our audiences can use and utilize these tools for their benefit. And if at the end we step into our discussion and question and answer phase, we'd be happy to accept any feedback that you might think what might help improve what we're seeing or what we provide. And so just to jump right in, the Chesapeake Bay watershed, again, you all are very familiar, but just very briefly, the Chesapeake Bay watershed covers over 165,000 square kilometers, and it spans over 6 states and Washington, D.C. And the largest rivers that flow through the watershed are the Susquehanna River, the Potomac River, the James River, and the Rappahannock, and the York River. And there are over 100,000 miles of tributary reaches across the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And so our tributary summaries and our geonarratives, the way that they kind of bunch these tributaries together, we do them based on tributaries of, based on their different scales, or they're kind of brought together. So for instance, the Maryland main stem, it's a group of different tributaries. So for instance, here, the 5 Chesapeake Bay main stem segments within the Maryland state boundary, or you have the Potomac that kind of functions on its own. And for our tributary summary reports and our geonarratives, again, the tributary summary reports come out on a regular basis with updated data and information, but the geonarratives are a rather new tool. And so we only have a select few geonarratives that are currently published. And in fact, we thought about maybe throwing it at the beginning so you can follow along. But then we were like, oh, maybe nobody will really listen to what we're saying. So we'll have a link at the end to you to access the geonarrative. But for today, we're just going to talk about the Rappahannock. And so we're going to go through the Rappahannock story. We're going to understand its physiography, its background, its context, and then we'll go into the different ways that humans may be impacting it or lack thereof again. What it looks like currently with the water quality parameters, its status, its trends, how it's being impacted, what factors are playing into that. And then we'll close off with what changing environmental conditions might be impacting the Rappahannock. And so next, physiography. So for the physiography, we describe it here as the Earth's surface, how it's kind of separated into different areas based on its predominant types of landforms found within each of its regions. So here, this is something that you'll find in the tributary summary report and in the geonarrative. And this highlights the different geographic landforms that you'll find within the Rappahannock. So here specifically, it stretches across four major physiographic regions. For instance, the Blue Ridge, the Mesozoic lowland, the Piedmont crystalline, and the coastal plain. And these differences in the physical characteristics of a tributary can explain, in large part, the variability in watershed nutrient yields. So, for instance, total nitrogen and total phosphorus and sediment transport. And so this figure here that, again, you can also find within the tributary summary report and the geonarrative, it highlights kind of the linkages between water processes and landforms and their impact or effect on nutrient loads. So for example, the Rappahannock, given the lengthy time requirements for groundwater nitrogen to move through portions of the coastal plain, reductions in total nitrogen may be lagged both within the long-term trend and the results. And so within the geonarrative, you can expand on this image, you can discover more of the different information and the different ways that the physiography might be impacting the Rappahannock. And then next, land use. So land use here is described as the human use of land, and it represents the economic and cultural activities that are predicted at a given place or practiced at a given place. So for instance, agricultural, developed, or natural lands. And so one of our goals is really to quantify the potential impacts of land conversion to water quality, what impacts that may look like on both the healthy watersheds and within the communities. So generally speaking, forest conversion to urban and agricultural lands increase nutrient and sediment loads entering rivers and streams. And so here we provide a figure that is found within the tributary summary report, but we have an interactive map that you can explore on the geonarrative, specifically for the Rappahannock River watershed. And so here, for the Rappahannock, we can see that developed lands in 2001 were more concentrated within towns and major metropolitan areas. So for instance, Culpeper or Fredericksburg. And since 2001, developed and semi-developed lands have expanded around these urban areas and even extending into previously undeveloped regions. So the gray area shows where the land had impervious surfaces in 2001, and the red area shows impervious surfaces developed between 2002 and 2019. So we see this expansion of these red impervious surfaces across the Rappahannock River. And so just for some context, the proportion of land within the Rappahannock watershed classified as urban has risen from 6% in 1985 to 10% in 2019. And this is a common trend that you see all across the bay. And so if you can explore this again in the geonarrative at a more interactive capacity and across the different tributary summaries is something similar. And so how might be this impacting the water quality criteria, or what exactly are we looking at as ITAT? So for water quality criteria, the science-based dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll A, and water clarity, so turbidity, for instance, criteria were developed to protect aquatic living resources within our tidal waters. And so the criteria that has been adopted into water quality standards includes dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll A, and others. And so here's just an example of what we are looking for. So this figure here shows the DO concentrations in milligrams per liter. Those are the numbers and the values that you're seeing, and what's necessary for the survival of those aquatic species. And so the water quality monitoring is critical to determine if water quality standards are being met in the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. So without water quality monitoring, it's really difficult to understand the current condition of the bay or if the health of the bay is even improving. And so what would that look like within our maps or within the tributary summaries and the geonarratives? And so here's a figure of the open water dissolved oxygen on the left panel. So that's basically surface dissolved oxygen. And then on the right panel, we have bottom dissolved oxygen. And then we have the status, which is from 2016 to 2018. And then trends for 1985 to 2018. And so the trends are indicated by the symbols. And so the gold indicates that it's degrading, so it's getting worse, or the green is indicating that it's improving. And then the status is kind of like the highlighted segments of this Rappahannock. So if it's gold, it means it's not meeting our criteria or what's necessary for living resources. And then green indicates that it is. So for instance, on this left panel, we see that although the status, we are not meeting the criteria across many of these segments, the trend has been improving since 1985. And so this is something that you can use to your discretion or in any capacity that you want to understand where we've been and where we stand currently. And so this is really helpful in trying to understand and measuring these trends. And we do this both within the long term and within the short term. So for the long term, these parameters reported here include total nitrogen, total phosphorus, dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll A, and turbidity between 1985 and 2021. And so we have different interactive maps for each one of these parameters. However, just for the sake of time and for the sake of this presentation, I'm only going to just highlight on a few of these. So first, I'll go over the Secchi disk depth. And so again, this is also an interactive map. You can zoom in, you can click on these different stations. You can see the station names, you can see the percent change. And this is very similar to the map that we saw on the previous slide, where the colors are a bit different, but you can see that the green and the symbols that are pointing upwards indicate that it's improving. And then the red and then just pointing down indicates that it's degrading. The circles indicate that it's not significant, although it is improving. And then the squares or the gray kind of colors is an unlikely trend that it's kind of ambiguous. We're not entirely sure. And then if you'd like some more information about the Secchi disk depth, you can click here for some more information of how we measure that, what analyses go into that. But essentially, Secchi disk depth is a measure of visibility through the water column. And so, yeah, this video is found and embedded within the GeoNarrative for you to explore. And then we have other videos and other items that can support and resources that can support your understanding and information of what we're presenting. But just to looking at this map here, we find that the trends in the Secchi disk depth are most significantly degrading at the stations in the mesohaline region. And so that's this kind of teal region. I don't know if you can see my mouse. This teal region here. And then we do, of course, have some improving trends more in the tidal fresh portion. And then another example that we wanted to discover or explore here with you all today is dissolved oxygen. And so for dissolved oxygen, again, this is also an interactive map that you can explore clicking on the different stations. It's very similar to the previous slide. But most of these stations here we found exhibit significantly degrading long-term bottom dissolved oxygen trends. So that's especially relevant in the mesohaline region. Again, that's that teal portion. And there's only one station within this entire segment with an improving trend for the bottom dissolved oxygen in the long term. And so what does that look like for the short term? Again, looking at the same parameters, and I'll use this same exact examples so that we can kind of get a comparison. So first, Secchi disk depth. We see that all the stations with significantly degrading trends in the long term, so what we saw in the previous slides, are now replaced with unlikely trends in the short term. So there are more stations with improving trends in the short term than there were in the long term. So I guess that indicates, some positive improvement. And then for dissolved oxygen, again, another comparison, almost all the stations here exhibit either possibly or significantly degrading trends. And so this is something that, again, you can compare and contrast from what it looked like within the last decade and what it's looked like since we've started monitoring in 1985. And then next, the different factors that might be affecting the trends. So here we're talking specifically about watershed loads. And so estimated nutrient and sediment loads to the Rappahannock River is a combination of monitored loads from the USGS or the United States Geological Survey. They're river input monitoring stations or RIM stations that are located at the interface between the non-tidal and tidal regions. And so next, we have also the below rim simulated loads, which come from the Chesapeake Bay program watershed model. And that's exactly what it looks like here. So on this right figure, again, this is something that you can find within the GeoNarrative and the tributary summary reports. On the x-axis, we have time from 1985 to 2021. And then on the y-axis, we have the loads in tons per year. And then the different colors indicate the locations. So the blue indicates the river input monitoring stations or the RIM stations. And then the gold indicates these modeled loads or the below RIM stations. And then the black is just the sum of those. And so nitrogen and suspended sediment loads to the tidal Rappahannock were primarily from the below rim areas. And first here, I wanted to talk about the nitrogen loads. So the nitrogen loads showed an overall increase of 21 tons per year. So that's going from top to bottom. So nitrogen at the top, phosphorus, and then sediment. And then phosphorus had showed an overall increase of 5.7 tons per year. And then sediment had showed an overall increase of 2,800 tons per year. And then next, these load sources. So we use here the CAST tool or the Chesapeake Assessment Scenario tool. And this is a web-based nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment load estimator tool that essentially streamlines environmental planning. And model users specify a geographical area. So for instance, a specific area within the Rappahannock, and then they select best management practices or BMPs to apply on that area. And CAST builds these scenarios of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment load reductions. And it also calculates that cost of a scenario to provide to the users what might be the most cost-effective practice to reduce those pollutant loads. And so it's really important to know the sources of these nutrients polluting the bay so that management efforts can be directed to the right place. And so here I'm going to show a select few figures that are very similar to the last one, where we'll be looking between 1985 to 2019 and what changes in the population size, the land use, and the pollution management reduced loads for nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. So first, nitrogen. On the x-axis, we have time, 1985, and then in the middle, we have 2009. And then on the right, we have 2022. On the y-axis, we have nitrogen in kilograms, and then the different colors indicate those load sources. And so we see a reduction in nitrogen loads by 12%.
Gabriel, I'm sorry to interrupt. We had a question, if you could go back a slide.
Yes, of course.
So can we ask above the monitored versus modeled loads in the slides?
This one?
This one?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, what was the question?
Oh, yeah, it looks like the question we got in the chat is asking on this figure, which of the colored lines indicate monitored versus modeled loads.
Okay, so yes, the monitored loads are the blue lines, and then the simulated loads are the gold brownish colored yellow.
And the black
Is
both because it's
Yes,
the sum.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
Appreciate the question, and it's a good one to
Yes,
answer live.
Thank you.
yeah, great. So yeah, I'll move on to the next slide if we're done here. I believe I was on the nitrogen. Okay, so since 1985 to this last year that we did our analyses in 2022, nitrogen loads had decreased by 12%. And this could be largely attributed to agriculture. So being able to understand these sources of these loads really helps in kind of identifying what our best management practices and what's most cost effective. And then for phosphorus, it's a similar situation where this can be largely attributed to agriculture and even wastewater. And then sediment loads by 13%, which is pretty ambiguous. Hard to tell, but I'd say agriculture and some stream bed and bank that can be large contributors to this reduction. And then lastly, around concerning factors affecting trends, we discussed best management practices. So within the best management practices, once this CAST model has identified these main sources of pollution, policymakers can facilitate the adoption of BMPs, or these best management practices, to lower the amount of nutrients produced by each source sector, so in agricultural, urban stormwater, etc. So here I have a figure that's provided, again, within the tributary summary and the geonarrative, that kind of highlights the BMP implementation area size. So on the x-axis, we have the different BMPs, and then on the y-axis, we have spatial coverage. So this is in square kilometers. And then the different colors indicate the time, and then the blue, of course, are our goals for the watershed implementation plans in 2025. And so we can see whether or not we're attaining those goals. So for instance, pasture management, where we've exceeded it, this percentage indicating by what percent, so 120%. Or for agricultural nutrient management, we're only 50% of the way there. And so this is really helpful in identifying what kind of BMPs we need to place, how rigorous, and etc. And so there's a few more resources available for you to explore more on BMP implementation. And we also even have a BMP reference guide that's both within the geonarrative and the tributary summary, and also here, and I believe all the links are provided at the end of the presentation.
Gabriel, one more question that
Yes.
came in. Is this slide we assume is modeled
Yes.
based on model data?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Both slides related to CAST are coming from that particular model. Great question.
I don't see the questions.
No, that's okay. We can
Okay.
keep up with them for you.
Thank you. And then our last section in the geonarrative, and specifically again looking at the Rappahannock, we discuss changing environmental conditions. And we do this in like a three-pronged or three focus areas. First, precipitation. And we consider extremes in rainfall, whether it's too much or too little, and what varying effects it might have on the bay ecosystem. And so thinking specifically of, for instance, dissolved oxygen or water clarity and chlorophyll A, these are used to estimate how the achievement of water quality goals are being affected by extreme weather events. So higher attainment values mean less. Oh, sorry, there's the figure. And let me just orient you first with this figure. So on the x-axis, we have time, and on the y-axis, we have the estimated attainment in percent. And so these higher attainment values mean less pollution and better water quality. And again, we're looking specifically at dissolved oxygen, water clarity, and chlorophyll A. And so extreme weather events and these major environmental policies that are highlighted here with these arrows really help us paint a better picture of what's happening. So each color represents a different stage of trends and attainment. So this blue trend at the very beginning indicates a steady improvement. The purple indicates a slight improvement. The red is a sharp decline, and the green is a steady and rapid recovery. And so looking specifically at these latter portions, these wet years in 2018 to 2019, we see a big dip in our attainment for these different water quality parameters. And so for 2018 and 2019, these extreme amounts of rain caused more water to flow through rivers and into the bay, delivering higher amounts of pollution. So while pollutant loads may be decreasing from BMP implementation, increased rainfall, it really presents a challenge as it delivers nutrients to the bay faster and resulting in decreases in attainment observations.
And Gabriel, this is based on monitoring data, then I assume?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It is based on monitoring data, but it's from our indicator, which is an estimated amount of reaching water quality attainment, just due to not having available monitoring data everywhere and for all times. But yes, it is based on monitoring information.
Very much appreciating the questions.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and what we look at next is of course warming temperatures and what kind of impact that might have on our waters. And so, for instance, specifically thinking about the Rappahannock or just the Chesapeake Bay in general, it's pretty shallow with an average depth of only 6.5 meters. So any changes or drastic changes in temperature in the atmosphere can significantly change the temperature of the water. And so this means that as temperatures rise in the atmosphere, water temperatures in the bay significantly increase. And you can see that right here within this interactive map. And so this is, again, another interactive map in our geonarrative that you can select the different stations. You can see by what percent change and specifically around warming surface water temperature and its warming since 1985 to 2021. So these are long-term trends.
I have another question that came in if you're willing to take it now.
Yes, of course.
It says, how is the amount of rainfall determined to be extreme? What is the base?
That's a good question that I don't have an answer for.
So that, if we're referring to the figure on the previous slide,
Yes.
this is coming from, this is a publication by one of our colleagues, correct? Dr. Chin Zhang, and in that article, we can link to it in the chat. There is a detailed description of those methods and what that determination is for what counts as extreme. That's going to be based on the precipitation data set over the years. So we will link to that article for sure.
Thanks for the questions, everyone. This is kind of exciting. It's engaging. Next, so I guess we're done here with the temperature. I'll move on to the next one. Our next kind of changing environmental condition that we consider and look at within the geonarratives are sea level rise. So over the last century, bay waters have risen by about 1 foot, and according to a USGS study, bay waters are predicted to rise another 1.3 to 5.2 feet over the next 100 years. And this rate is much higher than the global sea level rise average, because the Chesapeake Bay region is also impacted by land subsidence, which is essentially the sinking of land due to removal or displacement of water. And so here we provide a different tool that's not from us at ITAT, but at NOAA, they provide this sea level rise viewer. And so here you can interact with this within the geonarrative, and you can mess with this scale here to see what the land would look like as sea level rises from anywhere between 1 feet to all the way to 10 feet. And so this is a really fun tool to mess around with and to better understand how these sea level rise may be impacting your local communities. And so just for instance, higher water levels in the bay can result in the loss of marshes and wetlands due to flooding. And so this increased flooding can erode the marsh faster than naturally occurring sand and mud can replace. And so when these marshes face erosion, they typically move inland, and human development, however, it prevents this movement of these marshes, and eventually the trap marsh is eroded completely. And so wetland habitats naturally trap pollution, and they prevent it from entering the bay. So as these changing environmental conditions and these sea level water rise continue, these wetland habitats are destroyed, and there can be a serious increase in the pollution that we see in the bay. And so these are really important things that we capture, or at least we try to capture within the geonarrative. And this is something that you can explore. And we have links again at the end for you to play with. And then lastly, for our geonarrative, we'd like to highlight what community organizations are doing. So beyond the work at the Chesapeake Bay program, there are many other conservation and watershed organizations that are working towards creating and tracking a healthier Chesapeake Bay. And so for the Rappahannock, we highlight here the Friends of the Rappahannock. And the Friends of the Rappahannock is a nonprofit grassroots conservation organization that is committed to being the voice and active force of a healthy and scenic Rappahannock River. So they've been around this for 40 years now, where they've been the leading voice for river conservation and stewardship. They educate on the safety of fish consumption. They have programs on river stewardship, and they host recreational, community-oriented, and educational events. And their vision really is to include a community where citizens partake in personal stewardship over river resources, and local governments manage the land use and runoff to really protect and enhance riparian habitats, downstream waters, scenic viewsheds, and historical resources. So yeah, beyond the work here that we do at the CBP and what we do here at ITAT, it's really important to us to recognize the efforts of other organizations really working tirelessly to improve watershed health. And so conservation nonprofits, local governments, and watershed groups all play a crucial role in helping us achieve a cleaner watershed just throughout the bay. And so if you're a part of one of those groups, if you're joining us today, or if you know someone or a partner doing great work, we invite you to collaborate. We'd love to feature your organization's success stories within future tributary summary geonarratives. And these narratives, essentially, they're not just static reports. They're living resources that can elevate your work and amplify your impact across the region. So we really encourage you to contact the ITAT leaders, either Breck Sullivan, Kaylin Gutman, Dr. Kaylin Gutman, sorry, or myself, Gabriel Duran, if you're interested in being featured in the tributary summary geonarrative. And that right there is our tool that we provide with our geonarratives. That's the format from the Chesapeake Bay tributaries all the way down for the community. And we'd like to dive right into some use case studies of what we as ITAT leaders can envision or imagine what our tools can do for you. And so here we're going to switch over to a different tributary summary and talk about the James River. So how can you maximize the use of our tools? And so we have two different ideas here, two use case studies that we're going to consider. First, communicating environmental progress to the public, and second, informing partner coordination. So communicating environmental progress to the public. And so we have here just a potential example of what that could look like. So we imagine that a local government could use the geonarrative in public meetings to showcase water quality improvements from conservation investments, and this could foster community pride and support for clean water initiatives. So we imagine that within a community meeting, you can pull up these geonarratives, you can zoom into your local community. So for instance, here you can look at the Richmond, for instance, and you can zoom in and see what the station name is and what percent change of the total phosphorus has improved. You can see here that total phosphorus trend has been improving just generally over the long term. And so we like to imagine that this is something that can help you foster community pride and support for clean water initiatives. But beyond that, we encourage people to use both of these tools in tandem, in parallel, side by side. So these tributary summary reports and the geonarratives. So these reports, they dive deep into the science, while the geonarratives provide more context and accessibility. And so if you'd like to capture a big picture view of the watershed, you can utilize the percent change in the non-tidal area that we have here on the left. And you can use both the non-tidal data to capture a rather holistic, more whole watershed perspective. And together they can support a wide range of planning and outreach activities. And so, for instance, they can be used in public engagement to explain why certain policies or restoration projects are needed, or to demonstrate the effectiveness of completed work. So how can you use it? So we have two ideas here. For instance, one, more generally, just educating residents about your community's progress. And two, increasing transparency and build trust within environmental policy decisions. And so this is already a figure that we kind of familiarized yourself earlier, where we talk about the surface dissolved oxygen status and the bottom dissolved oxygen status, both the status and trends, and you can determine whether your stations or your local waters are improving and if you're meeting criteria. So for instance, here on the left panel, the surface dissolved oxygen is not only improving, but it's meeting criteria both within the short term and in the long term. So we believe that these could be really useful tools in informing those conversations and getting engaged with your communities. And then our second idea was informing partner coordination. And so we, again, provide a potential example, thinking and considering regional watershed groups and county stormwater managers collaborating by the use and utilizing the geonarratives to understand water quality patterns and target management actions. And so, again, using these side by side, both the tributary summaries and the geonarratives, you can zoom in and consider where you're currently at with your trends, both in the short term and the long term, and how these might be impacted by BMP implementation. So again, looking at the square footage or square kilometers or the spatial area coverage of these BMPs within the James that are found on the right figure. So kind of targeting these management actions by using these different tools. And so how can you use it? We believe that the geonarratives and the tributary summary reports can provide very useful background information for grant applications, and they can help in assisting setting measurable science-based goals in regional watershed implementation plans. So these tools can help you set these science-based goals, and by grounding your watershed implementation plans and the trends shown by our data, you can make the case for funding, you can show progress over time, and you can align with your neighbors on shared targets. So when everyone is working from the same information, it's much easier to set priorities and track results in a transparent way. And with that, I'd like to end. We provide here an access to the Rappahannock Geonarrative QR code. And of course, thank you to our ITAT coordinators, Alex Gunnarsson, who was the previous ITAT staffer, our interns, and we have new interns coming too. And then of course, photo credit to all the great photographers at the Chesapeake Bay program, including Matt Rath, Will Parson, Caitlin Johnstone, and Justin Kritzer.
And I want to add one more thank you to our amazing communications team
Yes,
for
yeah.
inviting us to put together a webinar and making it easy to do and get more information out there and hear from you. So thanks, Rachel and Bianca and team.
We'd like to take this opportunity to answer any questions you may have, so you can type them in the Q&A box. Also, we'd be happy if you raise your hand. We can invite you to come off of mute. So we have one question we will start with, which is how many geo-narratives are currently available?
I believe we have 3 currently available, but there's more to come. We continue to work on them as we speak, and you can explore them all on the Integrated Trends Analysis Team webpage.
Yes, we have the James, Rappahannock, and Potomac.
Yep.
Hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks, maybe, we'll have the Lower Eastern Shore. And then we are currently working on the Maryland main stem. So working on them as we go, but trying to get them out there for everyone.
And we, the tributary summary reports, these static reports, which we will make sure to share out the landing page for all tributary summary documents and geonarratives after we end the webinar. But originally, the group with ITAT set out through collaboration and lots of work across folks with the program to. Oh, camera on. I can do that. Thanks. Thank you. I didn't really tell. We started out as an effort to put together these summary reports and in the hope they would be useful and partners would find them helpful for a lot of the reasons and more that Gabriel talked about today. And I guess within the last maybe 2 years, we thought, is there something more we can be doing as a group? Is there another way, or what are the other ways to get information out there in a way and form that people find useful? And we came up with story map, geonarratives, and we hope that they are useful, and we are always interested to hear more feedback on if what works with these types of communication methods, what doesn't work, what you'd like on your wish list. And we were always happy to talk story maps, geonarratives, tributary summaries, ITAT, status and trends, all things.
So I have another question for you. What are your ideas for utilizing the reports and geonarratives into decision-making? Note, when we prepared Caesar, we would also use them to talk to policymakers, and they were stunned by the data.
Well, I'd first just like to say thank you for using them. We didn't
Yes.
know that. So if people do use them, we love to hear how you use them. So thank you for just sharing that. I can comment on the first question, but I'll open up to Gabriel if you'd like to kick off based on the slides that you.
No, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Well, some ways we envision it is through the education of what's occurring, because investments have been made to increase conservation and protection. And so this can show where things for water quality are degrading, so where we might need to be investing resources a bit more, or where things are improving and noting that the work and investments that have been put through are working. And then also so targeting, so where to put those resources, so not just education on what is happening, but also targeting the resources itself. And then also for, as Gabriel mentioned, grant applications. So providing information for that and hopefully then informing proposals that go through for decision making.
And we also want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
We are doing our best to make guesses here and try to match what we think are needs and asks for folks at various levels that go, starting from that final decision, or not starting, but it would be ending at that final decision making, but the steps well before that. One of the big goals here through the geonarratives and the tributary summary documents is to give folks clearer picture and understanding of what's happening in their tributary and what's happened over time without the need for having to be an expert data analyst or GIS wizard. So we really are trying to get the word out there, provide a great summary, and also resource list for folks that want to know more. So we want to hear from you. and the answer to Denise's fantastic question. And Gabriel, I apologize, I stepped in.
No, you guys covered it. Thank you.
But yeah, please ask and tell us how you might want to use these, or if you have in the past, that is also fantastic.
So just an accolade that this is very interesting and helpful info. Thank you. We'll wait a couple
Thank
minutes, see
you.
if any other questions come in.
And I'll just say, thank you also for that feedback, for commenting when something is monitored and information and when it's modeling. That's something that we can easily add to our, figure legends, and knowing that that helps you, means that we want to put it in our tributary summaries.
Yeah, excellent feedback, and I think perhaps something we can take with us to other groups and products we put out for the program as well.
Just another accolade, very impressive and helpful. I'm looking forward to seeing the chop tank report and story map.
Thanks, Carol. I knew you were waiting on the chop tank, so appreciate that, and yeah, stay tuned.
Wait another moment or two, see if there's any other questions.
And if you'd like to be your group, or you know of a group or work with a group that would like to be featured in the For the Community section, we wanna talk, we wanna meet.
So one more question, what is the schedule for the remaining tributaries?
Great question.
Great question. Thank you, Denise.
So currently I can say that we have an intern this summer, and so they will be working on the Maryland main stem tributary report and story map or geo narrative. It's looking like, I think, tributary summaries based on the current schedule, maybe 2 can be updated a year. Geo narratives, we can probably push more like 3 or 4 out a year. But just because of how much information is combined into a tributaries summary, it takes a bit longer to get all that information and also go through review.
Yeah, we are leaning on ITAT members and others for their collective expertise and knowledge. It's not just a matter of necessarily having those data being monitored or modeled in hand, but also putting the pieces together and getting the right interpretation, doing the trend calculations, getting the status pieces as well. And one upcoming change in future geonarratives, we will be sure to be also highlighting the non-title piece as well. Currently, the geonarrative is very focused on the title aspect, which is super critical and important. The written report has a number of non-title pieces as well. So we are working on, as Gabriel said, these are living documents, materials. So we are in a constant state of update, but that's where we like to be.
They're an incredible product and a wonderful investment. Please let us know how we can help support maintaining the momentum.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no further questions, thank you so much, Gabriel, Bracken, Kaylin. As Bianca mentioned at the beginning, we will be, this webinar was recorded, and we will be sending out the recording as well as links that were shared during today's session. If not today, by Monday at the latest. So look for that. And thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks for attending.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Great job, Gabriel.
Thanks. Thank you.